When you look at a map of Newcastle, the first thing you'll notice is how far north it is. This is England's most northern city, beating Carlisle to the post by just 6 miles. The second thing you'll notice is the Tyne River. This is one of England's longest rivers. And as it cuts and winds through the city, it has shaped Newcastle's geography and architecture into one of the UK's most distinctive, both of which have made Newcastle one of my favourite UK cities. As the Tyne cuts through the middle of Newcastle, it creates this extremely steep, dramatic valley which goes right through the middle of the city, and that has necessitated the creation of these incredibly dramatic bridges which essentially cross the entire valley. There are 7 bridges which cross the Tyne in central Newcastle, and due to the steepness of the valley, most of them are enormous structures which tower over the streetscape below. The first of the big bridges was the creatively named High Level Bridge. Completed in 1849, it formed an integral part of the Victorian effort to build a railway from London all the way to Edinburgh. Its inauguration was attended by Queen Victoria, who passed through on a train. As well as the railway, the bridge also carries a road deck beneath, the world's first combined rail and road bridge. Trams also used to cross it in the 20th century. Nowadays, only buses use the road part of the bridge as a priority route between Newcastle and Gateshead to the south. But you can still walk across it, and it provides some of the best views over the city and quayside. But of course, the most iconic of Newcastle's bridges is the Tyne Bridge, which was designed by the same architects as designed the Sydney Harbour Bridge, which, I mean, if you look at it, you can kind of see the inspiration there. That was completed in 1928. Now, before then, road traffic into Newcastle from the south had 2 choices. They could either use the road deck of the High Level Bridge, but the railway company that owned that bridge charged a steep toll to cross it. And this was holding back the city's economy by placing a financial burden on the city's residents and businesses. Or they could use the swing bridge, which is this one here. But that's at a much lower level at the bottom of the valley and required a steep descent at either side to cross it. And by the 1920s, this narrow bridge and the tight roads either side of it had become incredibly congested with the increasing amount of traffic at the time. Not helped by the fact that, as the name suggests, it's a swing bridge which had to close multiple times a day to enable ships to pass along the river. By the 1920s, it was clear that a new bridge was badly needed.
The new Tyne Bridge opened by His Majesty King George in October 1928. On it, the great bridge across Sydney Harbour has been modelled.
This was the largest single-span steel arch bridge in Britain, reaching 160 metres across the steep Tyne Valley and reaching a height of over 60 metres. Using 7,000 tonnes of steel and 800,000 rivets, the bridge's parabolic arch was built progressively from each side, with the road deck installed underneath over a period of 3 years. And it must have been one hell of a sight seeing the 2 sides of this enormous structure being built towards one another. Even to this day, it's the 10th tallest structure in Newcastle. And then you have these like Art Deco stumps. Obviously it was built in the 20s, so very much at the height of Art Deco around the world. And then you have this gorgeous span. It's just an awesome bridge. I like an awesome bridge. I like a city that has an awesome bridge, and Newcastle is definitely one of them. The bridge is currently being refurbished and repainted in time for its 100-year anniversary in 2028. And if you go to Newcastle right now, you can see them painting it in that iconic hollybush green colour, which is the same colour that it was when it finished in 1928. Interestingly though, I discovered from talking to locals that it was actually painted in Persian blue for about 20 years towards the end of the 20th century, before being returned to its iconic green in the 1980s. It gets repainted roughly every 25 years, and the last time it was repainted was in the year 2000. Once the Tyne Bridge had opened, traffic was redirected away from the swing bridge and onto a much straighter path, a route that we now call the A1, the main north-south road between London and Edinburgh. This new route cut through the heart of Newcastle along Northumberland Street, which was, as it is today, Newcastle's main shopping street. But by the 1960s, this too had become problematic as traffic levels had increased even more. So while the new bridge solved traffic congestion down here by the river, it created a new bottleneck up here in the heart of the city. And alleviating that meant building the Central Motorway, which swings around the eastern edge of the city centre and then joins back up with the Great North Road that carries traffic all the way up to Edinburgh. But although this motorway, like all motorways built through city centres at the time, dissects the city in two and required loads of destruction to bring about, diverting this traffic freed up Northumberland Street to become one of the UK's first pedestrianised shopping streets. And the area around the swing bridge now remains pretty free of traffic, which makes it easier to take in the buildings here, which are among Newcastle's oldest. That's because this area is where Newcastle can trace its origins, as a Roman fort 2,000 years ago. Now this is the castle keep. There's been a defensive fortress here since Roman times. Obviously we're on a hill here, we're right at the top of the valley, so you get incredible vantage points over the whole city here. And you can see from this picture of Newcastle in 1600 how hilly the landscape of the city is. The steepness of the Tyne Valley and the river made it an ideal fortress, which also gives the city this unique and dramatic cityscape which I love so much about Newcastle. And for the Romans, Newcastle was a strategic location. It was the northernmost point of their empire. And around the 1st century, the threat of invasion from further north prompted the Emperor Hadrian to build a defensive structure 73 miles long across the country from west to east. We know it today as Hadrian's Wall. It took 6 years to build, and defensive fortresses were built at 7-mile intervals along its length. And Newcastle found itself at the eastern extremity, with a fort roughly where the castle is today. And Newcastle's map is full of clues to the wall's existence. Not least Wall's End, where the wall ended, but also Hadrian's Road. And the path of the wall still leaves a scar across the city, but now it's a walking and cycling route. And I love that you can still see the foundations of the original Roman fort here, right next to the castle, which essentially gives Newcastle its name. Robert Curthouse, who's the son of William the Conqueror, builds a wooden Motte and Bailey castle here in 1080, and the town around it is named Novum Castellum, or Newcastle. The Newcastle upon Tyne. It was built after 1066, the Battle of Hastings, but this castle, the one behind me, was rebuilt and refortified with stone in 1177 by Henry II. It was used as a fortress for hundreds of years, including during the English Civil War, after which it was used as a prison. By the time the Victorians had arrived, it was no longer used as a fortress, but instead it found itself in the way of their new railway to Edinburgh, and so subsequently much of the castle was lost to new railway viaducts. Only the castle tower and an adjacent building known as the Black Gate now remain. But while Newcastle might not have preserved much of its medieval castle, it's been pretty good at preservation in other ways. So Town Moor is an area of protected common land. It spans over 1,000 acres, which is bigger than London's Hampstead Heath and Hyde Park combined. It's even bigger than New York's Central Park. Although it's protected from development, in 1870 they allowed 2 small parcels of common land to be developed to create 2 new city centre parks for Newcastle. One of them is Leazes Park and the other is this one, Exhibition Park. And this gets into another reason as to why I like Newcastle. Considering it's a big post-industrial city, it is absolutely bursting at the seams with green space. And this is quite unique for a big northern industrial city because a lot of them developed so fast and so quickly during the Industrial Revolution. You see in places like Leeds and Manchester that they really lack any city centre park, but Newcastle managed to hold on to the green land surrounding the city centre. It managed to retain those green spaces for the people of Newcastle, and so as a result you have this lovely park here at Exhibition Park, you have another lovely park over at Leazes Park, and you have this enormous expanse of space at Town Moor, which stretches really all the way up until Newcastle's northern suburbs. While parts of Town Moor have been developed with roads and other buildings over the years, it essentially stopped the city from sprawling northwards and kept this vast expanse of green space right on the edge of the city centre. It's used for annual fun fairs, a weekly park run and festivals, and in 1873 it held a political demonstration in favour of full male suffrage, which attracted 200,000 people and was the largest recorded mass gathering to have taken place there. And our exhibition park, where we're stood currently, takes its name from the Jubilee exhibition in 1887. But there was a much larger exhibition held here in 1929, the North East Coast exhibition of industry, science and art. Over 24 weeks, 4.3 million people attended. And this was similar to the World's Columbian exhibition in Chicago in that they built loads of amazing, grand, but albeit temporary buildings, which were all over this park here. The only building that remains, sadly, is the Palace of Arts, which is just behind us here, and that's now been converted into a brewery. The 1887 exhibition even included a model of a medieval bridge that once spanned the Tyne. Although it was just a model, there were houses on the bridge that people actually lived in. There's also a Grade 2 listed bandstand in the middle of the park, which was built in 1875 and is incredibly intricate. If you're enjoying this video so far, please make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future videos like this. I also have a Patreon and a Buy Me a Coffee if you want to support the channel even more. And I've recently set up accounts on LinkedIn and Blue Sky where I'll post all my latest videos. They're both looking a little bit sad at the moment with not many followers, so if you don't want to miss out on future videos, please go and give me a follow on one of those, or both. Now let's get back to Newcastle. As well as those two city centre parks and the gigantic town moor, there's another park in Newcastle which is one of my favourites anywhere in the world. We stood in Jesmond Dean, which is this stunning linear park that runs along the path of the River Ouse as it passes through Jesmond in the west of Newcastle. Because of the running water on the river through here, this area became a hive of industry during the Industrial Revolution. So you had water mills, quarries and even an iron foundry were setting up all along the river here. And this creeping industrialisation threatened to overthrow the nature and the beauty of this area. And so in the 1850s, a wealthy local manufacturer called Lord Armstrong decided to buy all of the land around here, and he essentially landscaped it. He planted loads of new trees and shrubs and exotic plants. He laid out all of these new paths and bridges and basically opened it as a landscaped parkland for the people of Newcastle. Armstrong was gifted the land that Jesmond Dean now sits on as a wedding gift in the 1830s. He built his wealth through engineering but dedicated his later years to building this park. There's a waterfall that was created by blasting rock out of the river to essentially create the waterfall. And there's just loads of trees and plants and things like that, and you can really get lost here. And it's here that Newcastle gives us yet another dramatic bridge, built by Armstrong in 1878. For the same reason the Tyne Bridge would be built 50 years later, it was built to allow people to cross this steep valley without having to navigate the sharp slopes on either side. And because this was an active coal mining area, the bridge had to be built flexibly to move with the ground below. It formed one of the main roads into Newcastle up until the 1960s, when the increasing weight of traffic meant a new road bridge had to be built alongside. And this freed up the Armstrong Bridge to be pedestrianised, which it remains to this day, and it now hosts a weekly market. Back by the river, this old watermill is a controlled Grade 2 listed ruin that dates from around 1800 and hints at the area's industrial past. It would have used the flow of water to grind corn into flour and flint for the pottery trade. But once industrialisation came, production moved to more efficient steam-powered mills, and this site was then used as someone's home until the 1920s. It's hard to believe that we're in the centre of one of the UK's biggest cities. This is a really stunning park where they've just kind of let nature take over a little bit, so you wouldn't know that you're like a mile from the middle of Newcastle right now. There's loads of lovely winding paths through the forest that you can really get lost in. It feels a bit like a fairy tale woodland. It's just a really stunning place, and it's just another one of those amazing parks that the people of Newcastle get to enjoy. And if you follow the Ouseburn River down to where it meets the Tyne, you'll find an area that takes Ouseburn's name. I really hope I'm pronouncing Ouseburn right, by the way. Well, we'll see. Now, Ouseburn was the cradle of the Industrial Revolution in Newcastle. You had loads of like craft shops and industries, like cottage industries and things like that, setting up around here. And the reason loads of industries sprouted up here was because they had easy access on the river. They had easy access by barge. They could bring coal up here dead easy. And so you got a lot of these cottage industries forming around here in these gorgeous old mills. From 1530, a royal act effectively gave Newcastle a monopoly on the coal trade, and this helped the city prosper. By the 1700s, it was the 5th largest city in the UK. As with most parts of Newcastle, you have these incredible bridges spanning across the whole area. But by the 1980s, industries left the area and the whole area looked like it was going to become derelict. It was facing decline. But it's at that point that loads of artists and creative industries moved into these old mills, and then the sprouts of the area's regeneration began to appear. In 1996, a development trust was established to look after the heritage in this area, and they helped lead Ousbourne's transformation into the cultural hotspot that it is today. As well as space for creative businesses, there are a ton of art galleries and music venues here which have helped put it on the map in recent years. And where new development has taken place on pieces of derelict land, it's generally pretty sympathetic to the area's overall architectural vernacular. They're sort of medium rise, 3-4 stories. They're not obtrusive at all. You can see they're built with brick, so they sort of fit in with the industrial heritage of this area. The flats have these really nice little gardens and like roof terraces. They're built over different levels and things like that. It looks like it would be a really pleasant place to live. You have these lovely little ground floor retail units. There's like a bar, there's like a restaurant over there that spills onto the canal. This is exactly the sort of thing that we need more of in our cities. I think if we had more of this sort of development in our cities, this just completely inoffensive, blends in with its surroundings types of buildings, we could build more flats, we could help solve the housing crisis, and we could regenerate places like this, and we could put more people on the ground in these sorts of areas. I think this area was obviously regenerating before, but stuff like this very much helps it along. It gets rid of a derelict site, it brings more people into the area, it creates extra space for businesses and shops and restaurants to add a bit of life and activity to an area. It's completely inoffensive, it's good looking, it blends in with the surroundings. What's not to like? And I can't do a video about Newcastle without mentioning Granger Town. Because so many UK cities were bombed heavily during the war, it's actually quite rare that you have a whole area of a city that has one harmonious architectural vernacular. But Granger Town is one of them. It was built as Newcastle's commercial centre in the mid-1840s. The area has 450 buildings and 244 of those are listed. It was largely built by and named after a guy called Richard Granger, who was said to have found Newcastle of bricks and timber and left it in stone, echoing what Augustus claimed to have done for Rome. The architectural harmony of this area is defined by its classical frontages with vertical dormers, domes and turrets. The prevailing height is around 4 stories, and each building is faced with yellow-toned sandstone, which is local to this area and was sourced from nearby quarries. The streets were designed for promenading, and the most famous street in this area is Grey Street, whose descending subtle curve has been compared to London's Regent Street. It curves as it descends because it follows the path of an old river, the Lort Burn, which flowed directly from here into the Tyne. And as the city rapidly industrialised, it was used as an open sewer. The Lort in the name likely derives from an Old Norse word for excrement. And so to bring Granger's grand vision for the area to life, the river was culverted over, paving the way for the Grey Street that we know today. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching. I've loved Newcastle ever since I first arrived in the city and decided I wanted to study there. So it was great to be back, and I've learned so much more about the city through writing this video. There are so many more stories and things to talk about that I've missed. So if there's anything you want to add about Newcastle or think I should explore next, pop them in the comments below and I'll add them to my list of future videos. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Here's a list of all of the videos that I'm working on at the moment. They'll be out in the next month or so. If you don't want to miss out on any of those, make sure you're subscribed. It really helps the channel and enables me to carry on making videos like this. And also don't forget to give my sad LinkedIn and Blue Sky accounts a follow too. And if you want to support me even more, I have a Patreon and a Buy Me a Coffee, links here and in the description. Thank you to all my incredibly generous supporters on both of those platforms. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.